Do you remember that Pure Pharma back in the early days of CrossFit? They sold like yeah. So they came out with like a vegan protein, and they came and sampled it, and it tasted like ass. It was terrible.
Dude, when I had Well Food Co., we were trying to figure out how to make a salmon protein. And so we had Joe, who was my partner, was like in the fish. He had like a client that like basically what they were doing was they were taking the salmon that they couldn't sell and then like somehow turning them into like a powder. And then I think they were using the powder for like dog things and all this. And they were like, what about salmon protein? The shit had like 40 grams of protein per scoop. Like it was like, like everything about it was perfect other than the taste of old, dry, powdered fish. And so we tried everything. Like I must have had 400 samples of it mixed with everything from sugar to monk fruit to chocolate. I mean, like this shit would show up and I'd be like, fuck, I can't drink it anymore, to the point where they were like, is there anything? And I'm like, no. Like, I don't care. Like there's nothing, like zero taste would be better than the taste that you guys give me. So for almost like a year, I sampled probably, and I kid you not, it was probably 400 different versions of this salmon protein, to the point where like any type of protein that tastes weird now, I'm just like, I'm a fucking puke. So yeah. And it was the weirdest thing, but like kind of like happens to you and you guys and your clients, where you're like, everything's going right. You're monitoring calories. The training's going pretty well, everything. And then all of a sudden you make a change and you're like, why did the scale go the wrong way? It's so fucking weird that happens. And then you know what? I'll make a couple tweaks and it'll be back. But it's so funny if you don't weigh yourself. Like I didn't necessarily notice. I was like, maybe my pants fit a little tighter or something, but I'm like, maybe my legs are just getting bigger. And then sure enough, I'm like, fuck, how did that happen?
I don't know, but we're keeping that story in there.
No, it's a good story. What, the salmon protein story?
Yeah, we're rolling right into it.
I roll the whole time. This is always the good. This is always the good B-roll. But yeah, it's man, that's fucking crazy. So how you guys doing?
Great.
Doing good.
Great.
Yeah.
The voices in which we hear, Power Athlete Nation, are our nutrition coaches,
aka nutrition ninjas.
Nutrition ninjas.
That's what I call them. My nutrition ninjas. They come in with quick strikes and just slash people into pieces.
Oh well, John, please. We have introduce our ninjas.
Mrs. Sam Flaherty and Mr. Rob Exline. Thank you for joining us on another edition of Power Athlete Radio.
Great to be here.
And we're going to discuss all things nutrition. So we have this thing called the hotline. It's usually real hot, so hot it might burn your fingers. And we ask people to call in and leave really good questions, not really boring stuff, but actually good stuff. And on occasion, we get some really dope nutrition. And when we do, we got to tap in our nutrition ninjas and our experts to come in and help us eviscerate these questions. And more importantly, what's cool is because Sam and Rob are actually working with power athletes on the various programs on Train Heroic. And, they're on the feeds, they're pulling them out. People are reaching out, they're booking consults, and they're there as an incredible resource to help you meet your goals. So you don't wake up one day, step on the scale, and you're 12 pounds heavier.
Yep. And
you're blaming pea protein. How many pea proteins or shakes are you taking? A fucking lot.
Salmon protein powder.
Dude, I could probably do an entire podcast on how awful salmon protein powder was. In that entire year of my life where I felt just queasy for a year. Like I was like, I felt like I was in like the first trimester of pregnancy and I wasn't pregnant.
Well, I once thought I had mono for an entire year.
Turned out I was just really bored. It's a Wayne's World quote.
That is correct. Well, I guess ninjas is the appropriate term because I see them dropping in on the training feeds and with little facts, tidbits.
How's it going? I mean, I know you guys have been reaching out and, I've been encouraging you guys to get into the programs. How's the reaction with the clients and the people that are following the training programs with you guys going in there and, booking consults, bringing on clients, helping people manage the nutrition templates?
It's been going well. I think every week we have a handful of 15-minute calls. I'm getting a ton of emails. My emails are on, and Rob's too, are on all the threads. So if you ask a question, you're probably going to get a, hey, let's talk about this more in depth over email response type thing. But it's pretty exciting seeing people take nutrition more seriously because it makes training better.
Oh, so it's almost like they have a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, I don't know.
Symbolism. What movie is that, Tex? Symbology?
I don't know, but we said it enough on here.
That's Boondock Saints. Willem Dafoe.
Oh, what an amazing performance.
Symbolism. Okay, sorry. Not to cut you off.
Yeah, Rob, what's your experience been?
It's been really good talking to those guys and girls on the feeds. Just, I think they're really appreciative to get some of the help and be able to ask some questions and actually get a human back to them. And a lot of times they think that's a little more than they expected. So it's been good to get to know some of the guys and see what their challenges are and be able to kind of walk them through it. And if it works for them, get on coaching.
Are the questions kind of bucketed? Are you seeing a whole bunch of like the similar questions on Jack Street opposed from Grindstone and Hammer? I know you guys are dropping in on all the programs and I see it. And I'm obviously asking these questions because they're loaded and they're rhetorical in a lot of ways. But do you find that there's kind of pockets, like everybody on Jack Street's trying to put on muscle, obviously. So a lot of people are in that bulking phase, especially this time of year, whereas Hammer's kind of how do I fuel to be able to, go far, go fast and, have a ton of capacity. So are you seeing them kind of bracket out in such a way where you can kind of say, hey, you know what, if somebody's new to the program, here are the typical questions that people normally following this program are hitting you guys with?
Ooh, good question. Yes, I would say they are bucketed. And I feel like every man wants to be 10% body fat. I get that question all the time. Hey, I want to be 10 to 12% body fat. How do I do that?
So
the programs.
Every time I've been sub 10% body fat, it was really not a lot of fun.
And that's my response. I'm like, yeah it's going to be sacrifice, but let's do it. You're going to need a coach. 12
to 14 is more like, I take care. I watch what I eat. I exercise. But I like to have fun on Saturday. For me to be under 10% body fat, there was 7 days of no fun and monitoring everything and being able to hit everything. So, when I see those dudes down at like 4 and 5%, I'm like, that's a lot of no fun.
Yeah. No social life, very few friends, very few things you can eat. So,
but the other one, and I always think too, people would like to be that, let me see how I put this. What they don't realize is muscle is extremely expensive. So, to be sub 10% at like 150 pounds is pretty easy for a 6 foot tall dude. Now, if you want to be a 6 foot tall guy at like 240 pounds, 235 pounds, 220 pounds and be sub 10% body fat, now you're looking at trying to carry over, 200 pounds of lean muscle, which tends to be very expensive.
Yep.
Excellent points. Shall we get to our question? Because this is all about
the hotline. Bulk. Oh, but here's the deal. If you want to hit us on the hotline, remember the number 929-464-464. 0. 929-ING-ING. Hit us on the hotline.
Ready. All right. We're going to hit our voicemail. This is from area code 610 West Philadelphia.
Born and raised.
Here we go.
Hey, John and Tex. My name is Alex, and I follow Jack Street. I actually ask a lot of questions in the feed, but this one seemed appropriate for the hotline, which I've heard is always hot.
He knows.
So my question is about maintenance after bulking. Is it necessary, and how long should maintenance last? I read somewhere that following a bulk, it's worthwhile to maintain for 4 to 6 weeks to allow your body to adapt to that new weight, and it's supposed to make the cut more efficient or something. It made some sense to me, but it's also the sort of thing that sounds like it could be bullshit, so I need the power athlete experts to weigh in. Thanks for taking my call. Bye!
All right. That was a pretty good question, especially from West Philadelphia.
Yeah, nice.
That's Bucks County.
45 seconds, tight.
Yeah, that's 610 area code.
Yeah, it was closer to Reading or Reading.
Yeah.
But I had to drop the...
Yeah, if it had been a 215, that would have been Philly, but 610 will get you there.
Close enough.
Bucks County. All right. So just to rehash the question, he's on Jack Street. He's in the bulk and he's wondering what the maintenance phase and if he should hit a maintenance phase and for how long he should try to hit that maintenance phase after the bulk. He heard somewhere and doesn't know if it's bro science, bullshit, or real science, that you should try to maintain the bulk for a little bit before you get into the cut. Now, I'll reserve all my feelings on bulking, cutting, and maintaining. So what do you guys think? What would you advise our friend from Philadelphia?
Yes, he probably does need to maintain a little bit, keep that lean muscle on. Don't know. There's a lot in there though, right? Like, did he bulk and get fat, or did he bulk and stay lean? But regardless, you need to reset like your basal metabolic rate to your new breakdown of muscle to fat. And in order to do that, you just have to let the body breathe, like a diet recovery, essentially. So same thing like a deload week or on training. It's the same thing for a maintenance phase with nutrition.
So what would be an example of a diet recovery? Is that where, hey, all right, just Modelo's and enchiladas?
No, like but like let's take it like a step back. Like if somebody comes to you and they're like, "Hey Sam, I want to bulk. Like I'm on Jack Street. I want to put on some weight." What's a comfortable amount of weight do you think that they can handle? Where and we know when somebody goes for a bulk, they're never going to just put on 100% muscle unless they're using a bunch of performance enhancing drugs, which we're not advocating. So in a natural environment, like what's an acceptable amount of weight that they could gain in a week, over a month, maybe over 3 months, if they, were actually trying to put on weight in the bulk, but not trying to necessarily just put on, 30 pounds of butter?
Realistically, I set my goals for like 5% increase, maybe 5 to 10%. And it just depends, again, how their body's responding. I mean, I just had a client she was a female. She wanted to bulk with me.
How rare is that?
Bulk with me. But she was having a hard time gaining. And we realized she had a huge amount of gut issues going on. Right. So that turned into an elimination diet. As soon as we got her off of the elimination diet, she shot up 5 pounds of and she looked lean and ready to go. So it really just depends what's really going on with you.
So I think it depends on, who are you as an athlete, right? I mean, and what do you want to do? I think, probably over, 3 months, like Sam said, 5 to 10% kind of depends on how what your size is now. 5% of 200 is what, like, I don't know, 10 pounds, right? Something like that. So, it's probably realistic.
Yeah.
So when you do the bulk, obviously, we've always advocated making sure that they do some aerobic work so they stay in shape. But you know what? Also, calories are expensive. So if all of a sudden they're in a bulking situation, and you're trying to say, hey, if we know, a pound is equal to 3,500 calories, and we got to try to up this, 1 to 2 pounds a week. So we got to pick up an extra 7,000 calories. And the guy's doing something like Jack Street. Are you guys advising them to maybe take some longer rest sets? Maybe some intra, peri nutrition approaches, but like, how are you necessarily getting at? Is it just like, hey, we're going to throw in a couple extra meals at you, go Doris Wellborn style, and just give you pancakes, which sounds amazing. Don't get me wrong, but
I think again, it depends on the person and how what's their life outside the gym like, how realistic is it for them to add meals, if it isn't very realistic to add meals in, then they probably do need to do some sort of inner workout, nutrition, and taking some longer rest sets in between. And like you said, eating the calories is expensive too. I mean, because now you're also increasing, your digestion, you're increasing all that other stuff. So you're kind of, playing both ends of this. Plus the body has some, crazy defense systems in there too, to kind of tell you to slow your roll a little bit. So
are you talking about decreasing the metabolic rate? Like getting into a situation where all of a sudden now, I guess it's more increasing. Like you've seen that in the lean, where all of a sudden you start cutting calories and now all of a sudden they get a slower metabolic rate. And, where their BMR might have been, 2,000, now all of a sudden it's clicking down to 16, 17, because once it gets in the starvation. Would you say that the opposite happens in the bulk when all of a sudden you start feeding it, all of a sudden now it goes up? So now you got to almost like calculate for more calories because the basal metabolic rate is actually going up?
Well, I mean, it's going to theoretically, if you're adding weight, you're gonna increase your BMR a little bit. So you might have to, handle up on that with some extra calories for sure. I don't know that there's a set point theory, and you see that certainly with weight loss, where your body doesn't like to get too far away from where it likes to be. Mm-hmm. So it starts to do things like you were talking about, the BMR going down, right? So you'll start maybe not moving around, not fidgeting as much. You'll start to get hungrier. And that opposite might start to happen if you're starting to gain a little too far away from the set point too, where you won't get as hungry too. So things like that will start to kind of happen.
So then how are you tracking it? And then also where does the variable of training go in? And I always think, for me personally, whenever I've had to do any type of cuts or, try to get down in sub 10%, it always helped for me to kind of overfeed a little bit and to kind of bang weights and try to push it. And then all of a sudden kind of get everything headed in this direction and then start the cut. I found that people, and especially when I was working with clients, on kind of larger mass scale, the people that were always cutting tended to have the shittiest results, because they were always in this kind of starvation diet mode. They were always kind of fighting for it. So there's kind of an ebb and flow. And I think that's what you guys are seeing, where, hey, I'm going to bulk for a little bit, I'm going to maintain, and then it's going to help me into the cut.
Yeah. And that's kind of with Rob talking about the set point, that's where the maintenance comes in, right? So if you've worked really hard to gain 10 pounds over 3 months, you want to make that your new set point, so you don't really fluctuate above or below that. So that's another thing that the maintenance, in theory, and what we've seen with our clients, does provide. So, if you get down to 10% body fat, that's your new low, and then you maintenance and your body hovers around that 10 instead of hovering around that 14. And so it's easier to get back to where you want to be.
So how often do you guys weigh your clients? I mean, are they turning in are they reaching out to you guys daily, weekly, or, what do you recommend in terms of managing scale?
I do weekly check-ins, and I recommend, if some people are just strictly habit-based in the beginning, but if you're really wanting to do an aggressive lean or an aggressive bulk, I have at least 3 times a week. So typically Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Monday keeps you honest over the weekend, especially if you're cutting. And then I average those weights when they email me on Friday and just say okay, are we trending up, down? Are we plateauing? And it gives a good data set. If somebody's versus just stepping on the scale 1 day a week.
If somebody's trending, let's say, the wrong way, all of a sudden now they seem to be going up, is it something where you're necessarily pulling out food, or are you prescribing more exercise? Hey, you need to get out and take some more walks, or do you kind of have both of those levers? Hey, let's turn up the the amount of exercise, or maybe just some extra aerobic work before we start pulling out food?
Depends on the person. Yeah. I think, depends on the person and what they're like. If someone is going the other direction and they're, the only activity they get is their hour workout a day, then I would probably say, add in some walking or something like that, because, I think the misnomer that people have is that because I work out, I'm an active person. And if you're a desk jockey and you only work out, then you're really not, you're more inactive than you are active. Sure. So yeah, you might be working out pretty hard in the gym, but your overall day is probably sitting behind a desk. So you're not super active. So if that person is maybe going the other direction, then I definitely might add in some activity, walk or something like that even.
Yeah. And 2, you can look at diet, right? John, you were just saying you switched to pea protein and you're trending up. So maybe they were I was trying this new whatever food and they're just retaining, or they're unhealthy, or their gut's unhappy. And you need to identify, okay, what change did you actually make in the last week or 2 weeks? And it could be something they're eating, stress, adding sleep. Sleep. There's a ton of stuff.
I know in my case, it's basically just inflammation. Like I just feel super bloated, and all of a sudden step on the scale and was more. And it's like, I know I didn't put on that muscle. I know that's not, I mean, there's no way to put on that much fat that quickly, but it's all of a sudden something where you're like, man, I just feel really inflamed, and like my gut is like so full. And I stepped on the scale, and it was crazy before I got all that blood work done. And then all of a sudden now I'm like up, and like even in my head, and I know, you know, like for all the science and all the people we've worked with and all, you know, everything that we've ever read and people we've had on here, like you have a big science kind of knowledge base, but it's still like, shit, what mistake am I making? Like this isn't trending the way I thought it would. And I think the thing which is great about you guys, and especially having kind of a nutrition coach and somebody to work with, is there's a voice of reason, because unfortunately you step on the scale, you see it, and now all of a sudden like the little person in the back of your head is like, you know, ready to like, you know, fucking burn the ships and figure out something else. And this shit fucking doesn't work. And you go crazy. And it's nice to have individuals like yourselves to reach out to and be like, hey, this is happening. And then it's like, you start playing the detective. Okay, what did you change? What are we doing different? Mm-hmm. Here's by the numbers what we've been doing. What do they exercise? Are you still training? And you go through and you start kind of removing these different kind of barriers for it. And it very well might be something like, man, I changed this up and I feel super full all the time. And my digestion's off, and you're like, well, pull that out and let's see if it changes. And then all of a sudden, you know, in 7-8 days, now all of a sudden they're back down to where they were before, and now you get to start it again. But I think what happens is if they don't have somebody like you guys, and that's why I call you guys the nutrition ninjas, then they're kind of on their own to kind of figure out, you know, and then now all of a sudden they're on, you know, page 475 of some bodybuilding.com form about, about how to lose weight. And you're like, dude, I'm telling you, it's not on there. And, like I always felt like we had, what was the name of God, I can't remember the name of the dude we had on the podcast years ago. He made a good point where he said, if somebody can manage a spreadsheet, they can get in shape. And he's like, if you can just monitor your calories, track it, manage a spreadsheet, and kind of move in the right direction and be smart and have somebody there to kind of guide you a little bit and, you know, basically keep you from, you know, fucking yourself up, you can usually meet your goal pretty well. And, that seems to be the case.
Yeah, John, I think you made a really excellent point there is about being a detective, right? I mean, you do have to be kind of a detective. And, you know, I tell people a lot, like you kind of have to be your own scientist and your own, you know, you've got to take a look, like, you know, you're pretty in tune with how you eat. So you realize that the one thing that you added in was this pea protein, right? And so you were able to ask the question, what's different? You know, and I think a lot of people just are not that aware yet, right? And I think that's where Sam and I can kind of come in and help them be detectives and just ask the questions like, you know, are you doing this? What did you change? What kinds of things are happening that they themselves don't see? Because it's kind of like being a coach in the gym. You know, people are moving, but they don't see themselves, right? So a coach outside sees them moving and has a much better perspective than typically than the people in the trenches doing it, right? So we're there to be detectives and help them be detectives as well.
And Rob's making an excellent good. Rob's making an excellent point in that the power of a nutrition coach, and similar to a strength and conditioning coach and a lot of the topics and perspectives we add to that, our nutrition coaches are expanding what a coach means to someone. So Alex here from, where was he?
Bucks County. 610 Westchester kind of area.
He is asking specifically, I need some guidance maintaining. Is this going to last 4 weeks, 5 weeks? What should I do here? I still want to do this. Then we have still a nutrition coach coming to you. I need some accountability. I need an accountability buddy, somebody to tell me to put the fork down and daily check in, so on and so forth. So there's layers to this. It's not just providing what to eat, how much to eat. It's being there for them and being the detectives, empowering them, and so much more.
Yeah, so it's really just somebody to help you go on that journey. And I think we see that all the time because, people buy the nutrition templates and they have the information. And I think that's what's so valuable with you guys, especially with the consults that you guys are doing, where you're helping people kind of skim this and get on the right program and moving. And now there's a resource that they can reach back out to if things stall out. It's kind of like I run into this myself because we program for so many people. I hate writing programming for myself. So like I'll reach out to other people and to friends and be like, hey, send me some training programs, just because I'm really interested in what other people are doing. And I think with the nutrition stuff, it's easy to sit down and say, hey, I got this. But to humble yourself to the point where you're like, hey, you know what? I'm going to need some assistance and just somebody to talk through, because as we've talked so many times on this podcast, food is so emotional. Like there's such an amazing emotional connection with food, like more than anything else I've ever seen, where, I mean, almost like a drug, where people tie emotion to food for holidays and, the smell of something, like I just, like my brother is moving, they bought a new house and they're selling their old house. And, there was like, the realtor comes through and is like, hey, studies have shown that this smell in the house sells a home really quickly. So they like lit candles. My brother's like, you heard of this? I'm like, actually, I believe that. Sure enough, the first person that came through made an all cash offer over 10 grand of what they were asking.
What's the name of that candle, John?
Why are you selling your house?
I just want to have it in my back pocket.
In case you got to sell?
Uh-huh. Market is hot, like the hotline.
Yeah, but the problem is if you sell in a high market, you got to buy in a high market.
Yeah. Okay. Never mind.
Yeah, it's a bad idea. But yeah, so kind of like there's that kind of emotional connection that people have with food. Have you guys found when you're working with people that you got to kind of weed through that a little bit and strip away a couple layers, especially if you get into things where you're like, hey, we have some issues now, we're in an elimination diet, and now there's some emotional baggage tied to these foods?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's along with that, a big question is like family dinners. Like, hey, I have 2 kids, a husband, like, how do I eat at dinner without being weird or cooking something completely separate? And it's really like, it's almost hard to talk about because it's so simple. So it's like, if you're having
Dino
spaghetti,
nuggets,
what?
Dino nuggets.
Yeah, no, don't eat Dino.
Have you ever seen this?
Nuggies, John.
So not to cut you off, but just a funny joke when we were, we take the kids to Costco, and for years they were trying to get us to get them Dino nuggets. And you guys know what Dino nuggets are. They're actually chicken nuggets that are breaded that look like dinosaurs.
Oh yeah.
And they actually make gluten-free ones now. And of course they do. So yeah, of course they do. So we got them, and I like finally broke, and I cooked them, and the kids like took like one bite and were like, these are awful, and they didn't eat any of them. And so I was like, I just gave them to the dogs. The dogs actually slayed the Dino nuggets, but they'll eat anything. So sorry, go on.
Oh, they'd probably eat your salmon protein powder too.
No, even the dogs would eat that shit. It was awful.
No, but it's, say you're making spaghetti and meatballs, like don't mix it right away, right? Like just, okay, cool. Have spaghetti and meatballs with the family, but measure out your spaghetti and measure out the meatballs, right? Like just keeping it super simple. That's one of the things about nutrition, being a ninja. I don't really feel like a ninja because you're kind of just taking shortcuts and making it as easy as possible. But yeah, I think we talked on a previous podcast about like emotion. People want or feel they deserve certain things. So like, hey, instead of buying that Starbucks latte or going out for that drink or whatever, put that money aside and buy something like nutrition coaching. I actually told that to a lady recently on a consult. I was like, you feel you can't stop drinking Starbucks, put that $5 every day into an envelope, and there's your money for a whole month of nutrition coaching.
Wait a minute. She can't stop drinking Starbucks. What kind of Starbucks is she getting?
It was a dirty chai latte, but it was like whole milk and all of the sweetener, like everything in it. And she's like, well, my husband just brings them home for me. And I'm like, ask him
Divorce
not to.
him. Yeah, get rid of him.
Like, just say no, thank you.
I think I told you guys years ago, I had a nutrition client, and like, I was going through this log, and it was like, everything was laid out, and they were like emailing me every day. These did like nutrition, they were hitting it, and the scale was just going in the wrong direction. And finally I was like, okay, what's in this? What's this coffee? Like, are you putting anything in the coffee? And she's like, well, yeah, I'm getting the Starbucks coffees. And I was like, well, what are you ordering? And she like gave me the name of something. And I was like, okay, cool. So I went to Starbucks and ordered this thing. Sure enough, it shows up. It's like $14.
Yeah.
Right. It was like 27 half pumps of this and this. Like there must have been 1,300 calories in this fucking thing. And I literally like snapped a picture, sent it back. I'm like, is this what you're drinking? Yeah, I have one of those a day. And I was like, so be like, what? And it's pretty interesting. And it was like, I didn't know it was that calorically dense. I'm like, when the dude's just hammering on the sugar dispenser, like liquid sugary vanilla thing.
Just sugar water.
Yeah. I'm like, you didn't think that was, I just thought it was a coffee. I'm like, oh, Jesus. So like, that's that kind of detective piece. And then I also think, I'm like, you had to know this, but this is just somebody putting their head in the sand, the proverbial like ostrich. And the Starbucks, I mean, personally, I hate Starbucks. It's like the coffee tastes burnt. Like it's like it's over roasted burnt coffee. So when somebody's like, oh, I really like Starbucks, I'm like, you're not really drinking their coffee then. You're getting something else. No,
it doesn't taste good, but it puts you in the right amount of anger over caffeination to present at a seminar for 8 hours in a row.
No, we just did that purely on just spite, hate, and hunger.
The breakfast. We can do a whole episode on fasting with John Wellborn.
So
a firsthand experience.
Yeah. So on the seminars, I would just be like, fuck it. Like, let's not eat breakfast, just drink coffee and then we'll eat at lunch.
No.
And I didn't understand that Daisy Summers, like if he doesn't get well fueled up in the morning, has an emotional meltdown around 10 o'clock. So then Luke was like, oh, I got to get something to eat. And I'm like, no, just fucking fast. Just suffer through it. And then as you're suffering, they're suffering, and there's just a lot of suffering here. And then he somehow suckered these guys out. I'm like, you pansies can go eat. I'm going to go fucking just drink coffee and be angry about it. I might even drink take a couple aspirin. Make sure I speed shit
coffee.
Up. Oh God.
That's another podcast.
What you mean, the one where I killed Nate?
Yeah, the hot coffee incident.
Dude. So I have no sense of temperature in my mouth, so I can drink like the hottest cup of coffee and be like, "What do you mean?" To the point where people are like I let it sit for an hour. So we went to go coffees with Nate, and I sent him into Starbucks. He comes out and get like 2 large Americanos. He hands it to me, and I start pounding it, and I see Nate look over, and he kind of shakes his head, takes a sip, and then spits it out all over the car. He burned his mouth and actually had like some not sores, but like wounds in his mouth from like the hot coffee burning his tongue, and like he was all fucked up. And he's like, I can't believe you drink that stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'm totally impervious to any hot liquid. He's like, that would have been good information to tell me yesterday. And I'm like, well, you got to figure that shit out the hard way.
That's just really fun.
Yeah. All right, one final piece to tack onto this question, and I mean, we gave specific calories and just said maintain, but is there a number? What I'm looking for is a specific number. Is it calculated based off body weight? Do we reverse engineer? Reverse engineer from protein and macros?
No, I mean, like you have to look at like your basal metabolic rate is the rate at which your body burns calories with no exercise. Like how many calories does your body need to keep autonomic function going? And there's a million different calculators online. They're usually always wrong. Just because they are, because like there's no one size fits all. I mean, there's things like, we know that body fat's extremely oxidative, which is going to reduce it. The leaner you are, the more calories you can handle. So, I mean, there's a bunch of different variables, but realistically, the only way is with the scale, which I think is really interesting. I've tried to diet people off a look, like how do they look in the mirror? And I had this whole theory that you didn't have to use a scale. You could just go off of how you look. And then I realized that, there's something within your mind, within the id, where it actually protects you off of a mirror image where you see the best version of yourself. And that's why, like, I'm sure you've done this where you like look in the mirror and you're like, oh yeah, this looks fine. And then you see a picture and you're like, dude, I look like a total asshole in that shirt that was totally ill fitting, or this hat looks stupid. And you're like, but it looked fine in the mirror. And there was a whole piece of psychology, because I had this theory. I'm like, you know what? Fuck what people weigh. It should be how they look. And I was like, well, you know what? Like in the mirror is different than physically seeing it. So I then at that point, I just started getting people to send me pictures. And then I realized, I was like, shit, they have to know the scale to know whether or not they're headed in the right direction. Mm-hmm. And, while the scale doesn't have to necessarily be the end all be all, like the scale weight doesn't matter. We just need it for a number to track to know whether or not the calories we're prescribing are accurate. And then at that point, you're like, okay, how are you looking? What's the body composition look like? We don't want you to look like a fucking deflated bag or an inflated bag, whatever. But we need it to know based on, because like there's a lot of, whether or not people want to know, there's actually a ton of math on this thing. Like how many calories are you consuming? How many are you burning? Are you getting into deficit? How long are you staying in deficit? We don't want to stay in deficit exponentially over time. So there has to be an ebb and flow in that.
Yep. So I guess.
Yeah.
Just
so we get a scale.
Oh, sorry. Am I good?
So get that bathroom scale that people have scared you away from purchasing.
Well, but I mean, there was a whole thing, and and you guys have seen this. There's all this and I'm all for like the body positivity thing, where it's like, hey, be your best version of you. The problem is I can't subscribe to somebody being unhealthy and them being like, well, you have to accept me because I'm happy with me. And it's like, well, that's true, but you're 200 pounds overweight. I know you feel fine and you think that you're okay and that we shouldn't, and then there should be no shaming involved. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to tell you the sky is red when it's blue. So like that. And I think for you guys, it's like, hey, what's your goal? I need you to weigh yourself. It might be painful, but it's only painful the first time. And as long as it's moving in the right direction, we're going to get where we want to go. And usually there's an interesting correlation between, like, if we see the scale headed in the right direction, all of a sudden now the body's composition starts changing more so than just being like, fuck it, let's try to fix the body composition and hope the scale works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's just a tool, right? Like I'll just use myself as an example. Post baby number 1, I got down to 130 pounds, but my body composition had completely changed, right? Like I was skinny. And I didn't like that. I was like, I'd rather have more weight on the scale and have denser muscles. So like, I was like, okay, now let's bulk, which that was interesting mindset for me. Cause we're ingrained, or maybe you don't know, but being lighter is
better. Why did you get so skinny? Was it from breastfeeding?
Yeah, breastfeeding. I was chasing after my 8-year-old stepson, a 6-month-old. And just during pregnancy, since I didn't lift as heavy, I just lost some muscle mass. And I can tell it's happening again just because, the pressure on the pelvic floor, and I'm still lifting. I'm just not able to go for as heavy of sets right now. So I think I just wasn't able to build back yet. That
happened to my wife, and I called it the concentration camp when she was breastfeeding the twins. And like, it was literally like, I watched this woman just shrinking in front of me to the point where she was, I would go get her like 2 pounds of this like dark chocolate honeycomb. So they take honeycombs and they dip them in dark chocolate. I'd get her 2 pounds.
Yum.
And I would drop them off. And while she was breastfeeding, she'd put them on the pillow and would just crush these things. And
I was eating so much.
Yeah. Like she
I just couldn't keep up.
Yeah. Like 3 Thanksgiving dinners, like she was eating like double what I was eating. And it was just like, she was just fading away into this. I was worried that the wind would blow and she'd just blow away. So this
is not recommended to anybody. And I can't believe I'm saying it on a podcast, but I was crushing Reese's Puffs. Like I could not get enough milk and Reese's Puffs. And my husband was like, seriously, this is what you want? And I was like, this stays between us, but I'd eat the family size in like 2 days. Good.
And you know what? Like I think, especially with pregnant women, like there's this idea that, I was in good shape and now I've had these kids and I have to get back. And I remember telling my wife, I'm like, enjoy this.
Yeah.
And she like couldn't wrap her head around, and we kind of joke about it today. She's like, man, I could eat like a gallon of ice cream and lose weight. And I'm like, perfect. So it's what everybody hopes for.
Like I had ab veins and everything. And I'm like, this is great, but oh my gosh, I need to become thick again. I feel wimpy.
Nice. So then you start banging some weights and eating a bunch of protein.
And then I got pregnant again,
Damn it. It's funny how that happens.
I know. It's like, oh, I feel really good about myself. Oh, okay. Here we go.
Yeah. And you know what? What's good is congratulations. And also, cause on the other side, and you guys have sat, obviously had friends and people like this as a parent, like of 3 kids. And Rob, I know you got kids as well. Tex, no kids yet. But the idea of like having them and like, stresses, all this, I always kind of imagine, or we hear stories about people on the other side where they can't get pregnant. Mm-hmm, and they go through like, holy shit. Like, I mean, the amount of people that I've known whose marriages have just ended because they couldn't have kids and this, it's just, man, people put so much pressure on themselves with that. Whereas I'm kind of like, oh, it just doesn't just kind of, wife comes home one day and tells you you're pregnant. I guess it doesn't happen like 1950 style like it did to us, And
there's a lot with diet that you can mess around with as a female and as a male to help with conception and everything too. So
yeah, we were just going through that on the block one. One of the guys got some blood work done, and cool. He posted some of the results.
What would they look for?
Well, he was obviously just, trying to be healthy and get a hormone panel. And what was interesting was his total test was pretty good, but we're not necessarily interested in total tests. We're more interested in like what, free tests, what's bioavailable. Mm-hmm. And his number was really on the low side for the free and the bioavailable. And, like, hey, and he goes into the doctor and like, what do you think? And, and then all of a sudden, sex binding or sex hormone binding globulin was through the roof. It was in the 50s, which is pretty interesting because, that's created in the liver. And what happens is it gets released, it eats up and kind of attaches all that free testosterone. So, and that happens from like, obesity, oxidative state. It can happen from stress or, something going on in the liver. The most interesting one that I read some research on is like our grandparents, or let's say your great grandparents were like, your great grandfathers were probably had like a sex hormone binding globulin of like 10. And now like the average is like 25, 50, 75. They've had people as high as 300. And when that happens, now all of a sudden there's like no testosterone circulating in the body, and all of a sudden now they're seeing like asexual. I mean, there's all of these weird, interesting things. And you start kind of unpacking why. And one of the big things that they were pointing to, to kind of cue the John Sapolsky was the leaching plastic, having an estrogenic effect in the body and increasing sex hormone binding globulin. So there's some strategies for it, but I mean, there's something where you think you're being healthy, you think you're training, and all of a sudden you go in and you get a check kind of like using the scale. And now all of a sudden, like, holy shit, here's a new obstacle for me to deal with. Mm-hmm. So that's what she was talking about in terms of like tweaking as an adult or as a male. And then also on the female side, PCOS, where all of a sudden insulin's real high and the egg won't attach to the uterus wall. I mean, I had a client back in Newport Beach who had that her whole life. And then all of a sudden at age 45, she gets pregnant just by going on a low carb diet, a little bit of exercise, got in better shape, stopped smoking, stopped drinking. Next thing you know, she's pregnant like that after trying for 20 plus years. So pretty amazing shit can happen.
Surprise.
Yeah. And her husband was getting ready to retire in his 50s. And then all of a sudden she got pregnant with twins. Yeah.
Naturally?
Yeah, naturally. She was 40, like in her 40s, naturally, just get reserved the fact that she was never going to have kids, starts training with us, goes on a paleo low carb diet, next thing you know, gets pregnant with twins. And her husband wasn't there research that the older you are, if you get like as a female, when you get pregnant, the higher likelihood of twins? Yeah, there is. But I also wonder if that's due to all the kind of the like in vitro and stuff. Yeah. All the baby magic that's happening. You have to sign waivers. That's like, hey, I consent that I will probably have multiples. I call it baby magic because like these doctors, these fertility doctors out in, I don't know here in Austin, I just know in Southern California, are like wizards, like the stuff that they pull off. Pretty interesting. One of the guys I went to high school with that I grew up with on our street, he he's married to another man. I didn't know about it until I saw his wedding pictures on Facebook. And I was like, oh, so-and-so got married. And I was like, they're both wearing tuxedos. And then they're like, okay, great. Like, hey, go live your best life. And he gets married to another dude, both like real good looking guys, like live in West Hollywood. So it kind of makes sense. They hire a woman to have a baby for them. So they have a baby and then they decide like, we're going to do it again. And they decide, hey, we're going to put in 2 eggs. So that, cause I guess, the first time they had gone through it, it didn't work. And then they had to do it a second time. And then they finally got the baby. So they were like, let's cover our bases. Let's put in 2 eggs. And then one of the eggs splits and they ended up with triplets. So they had 4 kids under the age of like 18 months. The head dripping lacrosse coach here, he was on Today's show this morning because they got a little girl too, and then they had 4. So 3 girls and 1 boy just a month or so ago. So the winter storm. Natural? I'm not sure. I'm not that close with the dude, but well, I mean, but then the winter storm. So why they were on Today is the kids were preemies, all of them. So they were separated during the big storm and then reunited on Today. So so 5 kids under 2. So when we had twins, like when our daughters were born, actually they were born at Hoag Hospital in Newport Beach. The nurses kept coming in because they were like, we heard that there were natural twins in the hospital.
Oh,
and like, they just kept coming in, and to the point where I was like, whoa. Like, why is this a big deal? And she's like, well, we haven't seen natural twins in a long time. And I was like, why? And she's like, well, the in vitro, and they went through a lot of women are having this baby magic done. And that's when you see a high chance of multiples, and to actually have natural twins is pretty unique. And like, we felt like celebrities for a day.
Do you remind your girls that you're naturals? You're just naturals.
Yeah. Like I'll tell you, 9 years old is an interesting age because they're still kids, but like they're on the cusp of teenagers. And so like they have this kind of balance of both where I get to see it, and I just fear for the future where I'm like, I think
they'll be fine. They constantly make fun of me pretty good.
Oh yeah, no,
I'm impressed. They'll be fine.
Yeah, they come down and they just talk shit to Tex.
What's up, Daisy? So Tex-a-daisy has evolved now to just
Daisy. Like ups-a-daisy with like little kids. So they somehow came up with ups-a-daisy to Tex-a-daisy, which is funny now that we're putting this out because the Penguino now will have a meme with you as a daisy standing up.
Yeah. So now it's just short. What's up, Daisy?
Yeah, they're actually pretty good shit talkers. So I drive them to the school on Fridays, and they sit in the back and just talk trash about each other. It's pretty funny. I'm like, damn, this is kind of hurtful. Like,
you're a cheese stick.
Could have thick skin.
No, like their thing now is they compete in everything. Like, it's ridiculous. They're in separate classes. So now they were like, their spelling test was today. And it's like, I bet you I get 100. I bet you I get the bonus words. And I'm like, what are we betting?
Ooh.
Oh yeah, it's pretty good. They're funny kids, man. I actually had a good talk with them today that when I was growing up, if you did good in class, people were like, oh, what are you, a nerd? And like, there was something cool about not being good in school. And like, I was always kind of super nervous to come home with a bad grade. So I studied, because I can't imagine like some kid at school calling me a nerd was way less stressful than going home and having my mom scream at me for getting a bad grade. Yeah. So I was like, yeah, nerds. Like I still got good grades. Nerds. So now it's completely changed.
Yeah.
Like the single bag, like in the 21 Jump Street, where like now it's like all the smart kids.
And Billy Madison, when he rolls up and pops his collar on the hood of that Trans Am, rocking REO Speedwagon.
So I was in the, and like now it's like, I asked my daughter, and she's like, the smartest kids are by far the most popular kids. And I'm like, that wasn't at all how it was when I was growing up. Like, the smart kids were nerds. And like, she's like, no, it's the coolest kids are by far the ones that get the best grades. So I was like, I like it. I'm totally happy with it.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. I mean, talk about detours and complete tangents, as is tradition with Power Athlete Radio.
So don't get distracted with your nutrition. Head to powerathletehq.com/nutrition for more information on our opportunities to learn more, get a coaching experience, get our templates for gaining and leaning.
Yeah. And then we also have a performance protocol where you can actually book a consult with Robert and Sam and have them custom design, which we call the performance. We used to have a performance protocol, and we realized it was just not as accurate as we needed it to be. So the performance was book a consult, work with a professional, have them set it up, get you dialed and get you headed in the right direction. If you guys are on Train Heroic, any of the programs, Hammer, Jack Street, Field Strong, Grindstone, Johnny Wad, Johnny Bod, Iron Flex, Lean Enable, Third Monkey, you will see Rob and Sam patrolling those like ninjas, offering good advice, dropping tidbits, trying to educate, blow minds, break hearts, everything they need to do. And if you need more information, reach out. They are there. And if you have questions, we have answers on the hotline.
Ooh,
and what was that number again, Tex? 929-464-464. 929-ING-ING-0. Great.
And drop your socials, team, if our listeners want to just start to follow you and learn from your social experience.
Yes. So mine is Samantha __Flaherty. And then my email is SamanthaFlaherty@powerathletehq.com. Rob and I share an email along with you guys at nutrition@powerathletehq.com as well. So that would come to all of us.
And on Instagram, I'm PTRob1967. And my email is robxline@powerathleteheadquarters.com, HQ.com.
Awesome.
Boom.
Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the premier podcast of Strength and Conditioning, Power Athlete Radio.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Now it's time for you to empower your performance. Head to powerathletehq.com/training to choose from a number of programs to meet your specific performance goals. And if you like to break a mental sweat too, visit academy.powerathletehq.com and become a real stakeholder in you or your athlete's success. Until next time, bye!